1 o'clock.
Things turns 5. Boy, Things After Dark, the realest, most exciting show on radio. It is celebrating 5 years.
Happy birthday, yeah, my friend. One more year on them.
And we're going big. We're talking a live outside broadcast and after party, celebrity guests, live performances, giveaways, and more. You understand? It's all going down Wednesday, July 30th from 8 to 11 p.m. Things Nation, this is your celebration. Sponsors getting right now on good things then, you understand? This is the link up you don't want to miss. We are Things from Kareem Boya Things for Things Turns 5, Wednesday, July 30th, 8 to 11 p.m. Come out and celebrate with us. You understand?
The people's champion. Our mission is love. Our vision is love. Jamaicans, by justice. The people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Justice, justice for all. Justice.
Happy Monday. Welcome to Let's Start Justice with the Jamaicans for Justice. My name is Michael Jackson, Executive Director of JFJ.
I'm Jade Williams, Policy Research and Advocacy Manager at JFJ.
So, thanks again so much to those who are listening in via radio, YouTube platform for nationwide. We need to sort out our own YouTube page on JFJ. So those who normally listen there, you can just come on over to the party on Nationwide's YouTube. I want to say a special big up to our taxi drivers because normally they would just call in the office to give a hailing, as they would say, and some would just drive by to big up JFJ team. So big up to you all who are listening in your taxi cab.
Yes.
As the young people would say cab. We say taxi man and car, yeah? Growing up.
I still say that.
You still say cab? Oh, the car?
Taxi.
Okay. Last week, it was the Thursday or Friday. Mm-hmm. It was extremely hot, about 40 degrees Celsius.
Yes.
41 my car recorded. And climate change is something we need to talk about a little bit more because I had to turn on the car, get out, seek refuge in the office to get JFJ's AC before I could drive off because I was burning up. It was that hot.
Yeah.
So, I think we need to talk to our colleagues at Jamaica Environment Trust on this and to get, their conversations about what they believe we should be doing more as a country. I know we have a call from the collective, that's the group of some 30 odd CSOs who had met with Minister with responsibility for environment, Matthew Samudo, and a meeting was also had with the leader of the opposition, and JET on our collective behalf issued a statement, a call from the political leaders to say that whichever party wins the next general election, these are some of the priority areas that we should be focusing on. And we need to invite Dr. Theresa Rodriguez Moody to have a conversation about that so the public is aware of what that collective call is. But you can check their social media page to see it. I know the IG page has it.
Yes.
So you can go on Jamaica Environment Trust to see what that call is. And I also want to reflect on JET's behalf that they have launched a podcast. Yes. I haven't watched it yet, but I know the quality work that JET does. So please pay attention to it and visit their social media platform. All right. So the topic for today, Jade, that we're going to be discussing.
So we will be discussing understanding unauthorized disclosure. For those of you who are on JFJ's newsletter list, you would have received a copy of our research on last week Friday on the issue of unauthorized disclosure of HIV status. And we're going to be discussing it today with attorney at law Nastasia Robinson, who was the researcher that conducted this work. And we've gained some insight as to not only the effect of unauthorized disclosure, but what we can be doing in terms of a legal sense.
Yes.
In the response.
And just to say, we had shared our annual report.
Yes.
And some of the media houses had picked up different aspects of the annual report. So the Jamaica Gleaner had reached out to us, and we did an interview with Gleaner and our colleague from Jamaica Network of Seropositives, the executive director, Jamoki Patrick, was a part of that interview. And I saw some comments on social media asking the question, what exactly is the legal gap? Because you do have the Data Protection Act.
Right.
I saw some of those comments. So when we speak to attorney Nastasia Robinson, we're going to be explaining where unauthorized disclosure happens and why there is a lacuna, that legal gap, that loophole, if you will, in law.
Exactly. I do want to quickly, though, do our right of the day and our trivia question for today. So we'll start with the right of the day. Did you know? Right of the day is from Section 13.3H of the Constitution, which speaks to your right to equitable and humane treatment by any public authority in the exercise of any function. And this means that whenever a government official or public body, and that includes, for example, the police, a ministry, a state agency, is carrying out its duties, it must treat all individuals fairly, respectfully, and with dignity, regardless of the situation or the category of that individual, right? We do also have a trivia question for today. Our trivia question for today is, what legislation protects our sensitive personal data, right? So sensitive personal data could be a DNA, your health information. It can include your name as well. But what legislation do we have in Jamaica that protects that right? So you can respond by sending a WhatsApp to 2397583. You can respond in the YouTube chat, or you can send a message on our Instagram at JA4Justice. So our topic, as we said, is understanding unauthorized disclosure. And it remains a pressing issue here in Jamaica, with serious consequences for the dignity, safety, and well-being of people living with HIV. It's something that JFJ has been talking about for quite a few years now. And in our 2025 report, Unauthorized Disclosure and HIV Privacy, a legal analysis, we found that nearly half of the persons living with HIV included in the report reported at least one incident of non-consensual disclosure, with over 70% of those disclosures occurring within families or communities. And these breaches are not limited to, interpersonal spaces, but are also prevalent in healthcare spaces, workplace spaces, and in online settings. Now, disclosure without consent often results in emotional trauma, loss of employment, eviction, violence, any number of consequences that can be amplified by the stigma around HIV, which remains in our society. For women, the risks are even higher, as we've seen unauthorized disclosure weaponized in the context of domestic violence or to further unequal power dynamics. Now, despite the severity of this impact, unauthorized disclosure is often overlooked or normalized, and there seem to be weak protections or avenues for redress. And many persons living with HIV are reluctant to report those disclosures. So we're going to be looking with Nastasia, why that reluctance might exist, what protections exist, and what are those gaps. I don't know if Nastasia is with us now.
Yes, she's on. I was trying to bring up very quickly the report so we could share as we go along some of the legal cases that we've encountered and supported at JFJ. But as we have the conversation with Ms. Robinson, I shall share some of them from memory, and I hope memory will not fade me as much. But some of them I do know off the top of my head, where I can go through with some anecdotal examples. But Nastasia Robinson, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much, both of you, for having me.
Really appreciate it. So just to put in context, Ms. Robinson, as we said, is an attorney at law, and she supported for several years some of these cases herself. for on behalf of Jamaicans for Justice. So before we get into the unauthorized HIV disclosure, Ms. Robinson, I'm just going to ask if you could perhaps give even one or two cases for our listeners that you've supported that perhaps jumped out at you as, some of the worst that you flagged as something needs to be done on behalf of the clients. And you could give perhaps two different settings that these disclosures happen within the family perhaps, or the healthcare setting or workplace, just to set the tone so people understand and can appreciate the discussion that we're about to have.
Thanks so much, Mikhail. So I would have started working with this particular issue with JFJ in around 2019, right before the pandemic hit. The atmosphere at the time was recognizing that a lot of individuals who are living with or affected by HIV are facing the persistent issue of having their status or their alleged status or allegations of their status being disclosed without their permission. Sometimes it was at school. Most the disclosures that happened mainly were in the workplace and in healthcare settings. So one of the trends that we saw was that there was a lot of disclosure happening in the workplace. Sometimes employees would ask employees to do medicals.
Employers would ask employees.
Employers would ask employees to do medicals. And when that medical is done, they obtain certain information about the individual's health status. And not directly. Most of the times these things were done indirectly. But what we would find is that eventually the person would be dismissed. One of the main cases that comes to mind is a young lady who there were rumors in her employment about her status. And then there was an operation that was quoted as a general medical, it was quoted as there was medical reports needed for everyone.
Yes.
Medical report was done. They found out that she had HIV. Then they actually, because she wasn't able to read, they wrote on her behalf a resignation letter and forced her to sign it, and essentially forced her to agree to sign. So one of the issues that we found was that in her particular case, and it occurred in other cases, where persons who were on the particular part of the Venn diagram where they are they're affected by HIV and impacted by some other form of marginalization, they would be discriminated against to the point where they lost their employment. And because they didn't have the knowledge of what they or knowledge of their rights or what they could do, oftentimes by the time it came to us, there was not much we could do. Sometimes they were forced to take settlements when they brought the issue of their unfair dismissal. In other cases, they were ostracized or told they didn't deserve anything. And most of these things, as I said, were constructive dismissals. So it was very hard to even pinpoint. But based on how the facts of the matters go, you could tell that it was acts of discrimination.
Yes. And I can tell you, Ms. Robinson, there was a case recently, a few months ago, or perhaps late last year, that came to our attention. And the individual was a contracted employee by the government. One of those informal employment. I wouldn't even say contractual because it was so informal within a school setting that it was difficult for us to even think about what the legal avenues were. And the person said, listen, this is something that is going to spread in the community. I don't even want to go much more with this. So our hands were tied because you would have to deal with the employment side of things to even figure out how exactly to help the person. So that was another workplace matter. Jade, I'm not sure if you recall that one that came to us late last year.
Yes.
Can you think of another example, Miss Robinson, perhaps by the family, especially those that had, multiple factors like perceived sexual orientation tied to the HIV status?
Right. So one of the things that we saw coming out in the research was that persons, as I mentioned before, with particular vulnerabilities were at a significant disadvantage. So members of the LGBT community, sometimes women and girls as well, because the vulnerable position they might be in is that they're living with relatives who already are not in agreement with their sexuality, and who would have, the situations aren't ideal, their living situations aren't ideal. And when word gets out about their status, that causes friction within the family. We find that a lot of persons are displaced. And sometimes community members and family members will go to the extent of preventing that person from even finding alternate residence. So one of the things that persons living with HIV, my apologies, face is even finding somewhere to live. Once word gets out that you have HIV, persons don't want to rent you places to live. And if family members and community members know that, that is one of the ways that we find out that the rumor mill starts. And there's almost this...
Hold that thought for me, Miss Robinson. Let's take the break and then we pick up.
When you want the food shell and make the rice well, just gimme me Kendall. K-E-N-D-E-L. Gimme me Kendall.
Another quality product from the CariMed Group.
Just gimme me Kendall.
The time by Kendall Foods, the taste of quality, is
16 minutes after 1 o'clock.
Are your devices accurate? Are they calibrated? Even small errors can lead to big problems. That's why Jamaicans trust the Bureau of Standards Jamaica. From food to fuel, health to hardware, our metrology and testing division provides world-class calibration and measurement services to keep your devices precise and your business meeting global standards. Whether you're weighing goods, monitoring temperature, or relying on the accuracy of devices, we get it right every time. Our advanced equipment and experts help you move with confidence. Call 876-618-1534 or visit bsj.org.jm. The Bureau of Standards Jamaica. From lab to market, the power of precision, powering accuracy, ensuring safety.
Music a play and the people a rock. Everybody asks for the calico jack. Cups up, make a party. Rum punch, send him my way. What you know? Fruit punch mixed with the rum. Link on my friend, them know. Hey, sipping on a vibe, yeah, we happy. Calico jack and then we started. Music a play and the people a rock. Everybody asks for the calico jack. Cups up, make a party. Rum punch, send him my way.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We're joined by attorney at law Nastasia Robinson discussing the issue of unauthorized HIV disclosure. I know Jade wanted to come in with a question, but I just wanted to share two examples very quickly that we flagged in our report. Wherein one of them, and it's just unfortunate because it's the mother who is involved, disclosed the status of her son, HIV status, calling him that he has AIDS. And by the way, we don't use that language, saying that he has AIDS. And this disclosure came about because there was some disagreement about money. And the mother went as far as to share his status, both sexual orientation and health status, with a worker from from a restaurant and with a hospital without the son giving her permission. Then there is another matter that we flagged in the report, which happened in 2023, The individual was diagnosed with HIV. He shared his status in confidence with his sister, who then disclosed to the mother. And then the mother disclosed to other members in the family. And then, it spread because the mother started cursing him that he has AIDS and that he's a B-man. And, Jamaican language, what that means. And the complainant, who's the person who shared this complaint to us, said that he was told by his sister-in-law not to visit. Remember what Miss Robinson was sharing earlier? Not to visit, not to mix with the children. She spat on him and threatened to throw water. And you see the family dynamics here that Miss Robinson was sharing. And by the way, some of these cases, as I just mentioned, 2023, 2024, and we're still getting these complaints from some of our partner organizations within the HIV sector that we're supporting, right?
It's interesting you brought up those years, Mikhail, because one of the things that came out in the research was that there seems to be a resurgence in HIV discrimination, right? Some of the key stakeholders that we would have spoken to shared that in the past there was higher and more, there was more public education around HIV awareness. And so millennials sort of would have had the benefit of, during the 1990s and sort of the early 2000s, there was this heightened focus on HIV and reducing stigma. But as we came into the 2010s, we saw a decrease in that sort of public education. And with that decrease in public education, stigma and discrimination sort of went back up to the rise, mainly because even in schools, in the 90s and early 2000s, we were talking about and preaching and having conversations about non-discrimination. But as the years have passed, have gone on, less and less conversations are happening about HIV. So the original stigma and fears that existed in the 70s are sort of coming back on the rise. And especially after the pandemic, with the fear mongering and the fear that came with COVID, HIV again sort of suffered from that discrimination trope, because everybody know what was back on, we need to be careful of viral infections. And so some of the progress that would have been made over the years so far as it relates to HIV stigma and reduction would have sort of been eroded with the decrease in public education. So we saw sort of a rise in discrimination and disclosure. And it's coming out of, in COVID, there was the message of we need to know who is sick or wear masks and personal responsibilities, so to enable everyone to protect themselves. And that argument has sort of emboldened some individuals, the research found, to say, well, we have a right to know who's living among us. We have a right to know who's carrying this disease because we have a right to protect ourselves. And that, I think, is a result of a misunderstanding of HIV, even though there's been so much medical advancement in HIV and it's no longer as dangerous as it used to be. There's still a lot of fear around the disease. And because of that fear, we see the disclosure taking place in health settings, across communities, and within schools. And I remember one of the cases that came to me was a child of a school back in 2021, I believe, who was going to a school, and the school found out his mother or parents were HIV positive, and that child was discriminated against by the school. And unfortunately, what happens in a lot of these cases is persons don't seek redress or don't do anything about it, because in order to do anything about it, you're admitting to having HIV, which most people still don't want to admit. And then it's also, there's the fear of further disclosure, not because it's exposed by this person to now go through the process of admitting that it was disclosed, admitting this, so there's all sorts of reasons why persons don't come forward And the main one is the fear of further discrimination and the fear that nothing will come from, they'll only be further stigmatized with no benefit.
Well, Nas, thanks for that. You you preempted my next question, which was, why do you think persons aren't seeking the redress? But I think you had, outside of the discrimination, I think you had made a good point earlier as to, the knowledge of what is there to be sought in terms of redress. And I think about the different settings that we've seen unauthorized disclosure manifest, the healthcare setting versus home versus in the workplace. Do we have redress mechanisms for all of those settings? And, if you could just give us a quick summarization of what a person in each of these settings might do if their status is disclosed there.
So the truth is, and this is perhaps one of the main reasons too why people don't seek redress, is redress options are limited. There is the constitutional right to privacy, which can be argued to protect one's HIV status. However, that faces the challenge of meeting the standard to first of all be brought in the constitutional court.
Right.
And when brought before the constitutional court, as we mentioned, these cases are usually attached to other areas of law. So the employment, the family situation, and oftentimes, or it is likely the constitutional court may remit that matter to one of the other courts where the redress, the right to privacy is handled somewhere else. So
Yes.
there is the constitutional battle, which is quite expensive, and most persons are not financially capable or able to pursue that route. There are smaller legislations.
But before you even move on to the other piece of legislation, one of the things we've discussed internally and with you as well is some of the fear factors. So even to bring a matter to constitutional court, you have the legal costs that you would have to overcome, find that money. And then we know that you can apply to the court to get, I can never pronounce this word, anonymity. Pronounce it properly for me.
Anonymity.
Anonymity.
Orders, as you have it in rape and sexual assault and matters involving the minor. But that's left up to judicial discretion, and you would have to explain to someone living with HIV that that possibility is there. But again, it's a possibility. There's no guarantee because we do have an open justice system. So even if it is likely to come, persons living with HIV have indicated that, listen, I can't risk the possibility of further disclosure, and therefore I'm not willing to move forward. So you have the legal cost, and then we've seen in instances where people say, I have to move out of a community because my status have been disclosed. So those are some of the factors, Ms. Robinson, that we found to hurdles to overcome with our clients to even pursue that civil litigation as an option.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Mikhail. No, there's limited protection as well under the Cybercrimes Act if, for example, the person's status is disclosed over social media or using any other electronic means like WhatsApp. So there is that. But again, it depends on the person wanting to go through that process because, again, this is something that will be tried in open court. So even the Data Protection Act, there's again limited protection under the Data Protection Act, which says that your sensitive information, including your health information, is to be protected and kept private. So there's some amount of protection. There is no targeted legislation that protects HIV directly, and so that in and of itself makes it difficult because we sort of have to play a hopscotch. Sort of having to find what sort of depending on the facts of the matter, where this person can seek redress.
I want you to hold that thought, and sorry to preempt you, but I want us to go back to the data protection because based on our reading of it, it seems to be more institutional setting.
Right.
So who is a data controller and so on. So I want us to have that conversation because, again, when we looked at some of the comments online, we're precisely the Data Protection Act is there, the Cybercrime Act is there. The gaps that exist in those pieces of legislation, clearly we need to close them. And I know I think it was you, Nas, who had represented a St. Elizabeth matter, but it was tied to something else for the client to even get some sort of redress. But let's
so
have, But hold the thought.
That's the route we've had to take in, sort of attaching it to other
infractions,
other issues, other infractions, right?
Yeah, but no, don't continue yet, Nas. We're up on the break, and then I want us to pick up with that discussion, please.
At the Jamaica Customs Agency, we care for our employees, customers, stakeholders, citizens, and our country. Customs cares. The temperature by the Jamaica Customs Agency is
33 degrees Celsius here in Kingston and 31 out west in Montego Bay.
Things turns 5. Boy, Things After Dark, the realest, most exciting show on radio, is celebrating 5 years.
Happy birthday, my friend. One more year on them.
And we're going big. We're talking a live outside broadcast and after party, celebrity guests, live performances, giveaways, and more. You understand? It's all going down Wednesday, July 30th from 8 to 11 p.m. Things Nation, this is your celebration. Sponsors, get in right now on Good Things then, you understand? This is the link up you don't want to miss. We are Things from Kareem Boya Things for Things Turns 5, Wednesday, July 30th, 8 to 11 p.m. Come out and celebrate with us. You understand?
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We are discussing unauthorized HIV disclosure with Nastasia Robinson, attorney at law. And before the break, we were just sharing for our listeners that while you do have some pieces of legislation, depending on where the disclosure happens, there are some gaps. So we made mention of the Cybercrime Act and that there is some protection there, but it may risk the person further disclosing their status in court. But I wanted us to also examine very quickly the gaps there with this concept of what exactly is malicious intent and so on in cybercrime. And then we go very quickly to the Data Protection Act and what the gaps are with that. I hope I'm not putting you on the spot with some of these finer details, Ms. Robinson. I've been told.
No, that's fine. So under the cybercrimes, I mentioned briefly the Cybercrimes Act under Section 9. It does offer some protection where it says if someone publishes information that is malicious, it is a criminal offense that is punishable under the Cybercrime Act. The challenge with that is you have to prove that the disclosure was malicious. And many times the thing that we find with HIV is the disclosure is often based on the belief that we deserve to know because it is a public health issue. Mm-hmm. And so a person who finds their HIV status disclosed is faced with proving first to the police that the disclosure was malicious.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks for that. And then the Data Protection Act now, it exists, but what exactly is the gap there for us?
Right. So we mentioned the Data Protection Act, and you mentioned the limitation. The limitations of that is that it speaks only to data controller. Mm-hmm. So it speaks to, for example, healthcare facilities, and that would cover the instances of disclosure in healthcare facilities or other treatment facilities, which we see a lot of disclosure happening. But it doesn't take care of disclosure as between individuals, which is where we see most disclosure happening in community, in our homes and communities. So there's a gap there in that while there is a recognition that a person's privacy is important and necessary, is a fundamental human right, there isn't that sort of protection through the Data Protection Act on an individual to individual basis.
Yeah. And one of the things we flagged, policies do exist.
Yes.
You know, when you were going through the matter involving the child in school, you have the management of HIV in school policy. When it comes to just generally how we deal with HIV, there's a national HIV/AIDS policy. There's a national workplace policy on HIV. I may not be quoting the name correctly, but there's a workplace policy dealing with HIV. But again, policy is not law.
Right.
You know, so we do find a challenge. And just to put in context for the listeners, for several years now, civil society, we have been advocating for an anti-discrimination legislation, but we have not found a ministry to own that process. Also, remember, we have the Occupational Safety and Health Bill. How long has it been? Close to 2 decades or more.
Yes.
And we hear promises. I recall it was in November, and perhaps sometime this year on Twitter, we had our Minister of Labour and Social Security, Pernell Charles Jr., making a promise that the OSHA will eventually be tabled because the priority of the government.
It's a priority. Yes.
But it's talk. Nothing so far. So from where you sit, Ms. Robinson, what would be your call? Because certainly for us at JFJ, we need to move with some alacrity on ensuring that these bills become laws. And also I would call personally on Dr. Christopher Tufton, where the Ministry of Health owns the anti-discrimination legislation, and eventually have his parliamentary colleagues pass it. And the parliamentary opposition needs to be aware of these issues so they can do their own championing in Parliament. But from where you sit, Ms. Robinson, what would you say are the gaps there with the policy, the OSHA, and so on?
Thanks, Michael. So there are, as we touched on, several of pieces of the legislation that speak to HIV in a sort of roundabout way. There are also the policies that you mentioned. However, though the policies all mention the intention for legislation, none of that has come forth. But Michael, for me, I think what is important to prevent HIV disclosure is public education. Mm-hmm. I think we need to see a resurgence in public education and awareness.
Yes.
Around HIV in general, the need to protect HIV information, but also I think it's lost on, there's a misunderstanding of the disease itself and the understanding of it. Mm-hmm. And until we address that, whether or not we have laws, then we'll always be dealing with the issue of unauthorized disclosure. And then we deal with the wider societal problems that the having laws don't mean that the system and who is going to enforce these laws won't still have these biases. So it's good to have the laws, but if the police and the people who are charged with enforcing these laws aren't themselves sensitized, then the policies and the framework essentially doesn't make a difference to the lives of those living with HIV.
Yeah. And as you were talking about the importance of public education, even within the healthcare setting, one of the things you discussed in the report, which you authored on our behalf, is the issue of unintentional disclosure that happens so frequently simply because of the infrastructural setting within the healthcare facilities, for example. And I think it's important to put in context that a lot of the disclosure in the health facility is not necessarily by medical professionals, it's the non-medical staff. For example, the security guards supporting how dockets are managed. And then you come in the middle of the room and you shout out Michael Jackson's name to go in a particular location that is designated for people living with HIV. Right. Those things are still happening. So until you fix some of those settings and how the health facilities operate, unfortunately, as Ms. Robinson outlined, the disclosure may very well continue because some of it was not intentional to begin with. And then we have the training, Ms. Robinson, for the healthcare staff, police officers, and so on. But, I perhaps think we need some more for the non-medical staff, a little bit more to mitigate some of what we've been seeing and reduce it.
Yes, I agree. We saw a lot of disclosure in the health, as you said, the infrastructure of many of our health facilities cause unintentional disclosure. There's not enough privacy, for example. The designation of areas labeled HIV are known to be where persons of certain illnesses, not just HIV, but just labeling certain places. That is a way that persons' information is disclosed. And while even though we're talking about the privacy of HIV information, all medical information is to be kept private. But the infrastructure of a lot of our medical facilities doesn't render or offer that confidentiality.
Yeah. I saw two questions in the YouTube chat that I wanted to put to you. Jade, I don't have my glasses on. So if you could
Sure.
you saw them. One of them was what medical information could be shared. Can you find that one quickly for Ms. Robinson?
Sure. The question was, is it appropriate to put medical information on a regular personnel file? So I guess it's more in the context of employment. If they ask you to do, for example, a medical or whatever kind of
for suitability for your work,
health related screening, is that information something that makes up now a part of your employee file, and people have access to that essentially?
Well, first of all, your employer shouldn't be asking you for any medical information that is not directly related to your role of employment. And so any information that isn't related to or can affect your employment ought not to be on your employee file.
Full stop.
Right.
Yeah. And I think, well, let me ask, any last word from you, Ms. Robinson, last call, recommendation before we take leave?
I would say we with the advancement in treatment for HIV, I think there's been sort of we have this under control now. We don't need to put as much effort and money into it to do the public education. But the research shows and the experiences of persons living with HIV shows that it's still a relevant issue. People are still being discriminated against because of their status. And while there are persons in for example, the middle and upper class that are able to circumvent these sorts of discrimination, persons in the lower class of society are taken advantage of because of, they have very limited access to basically everything, to employment. And so when they're employed, they're at the beck and call of their employers, they're at the beck and call of their community members. And so there's not a lot of protection.
Yeah.
And so my call would be, there always needs to be continued education around HIV and around the importance of protecting health information in general, because your health information or on your private and sensitive information goes hand in hand with human dignity. And everybody has a right to be left alone, for their business to be left alone, essentially. And that's just what persons living with HIV are asking for, to be left alone and to be able to live a normal, healthy life. And they often can't do that because the society is still very afraid that they're carrying around a deadly disease.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That was Nastessa Robinson, attorney at law and author, legal researcher for a report that JFJ just published. We need to put it on our social media pages. Sure. Thanks again, Ms. Robinson, for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Have a good day.
Thanks so much. It's two things I want to say, Jade, before we take the break, or can we continue? Technical operator, Mr. Damien. I can't see. Okay. So before we go to the break, just two things. I think we do need to invite the Information Commissioner to break down the Data Protection Act and just the principles of it, that even if it doesn't extend to more informal settings, in the family setting, the community setting, as the mother who disclosed her son's sexual orientation and HIV status, I do think the principle of the right to privacy and the right to privacy of information is something that we would hope the Information Commissioner could come on and speak to and answer some of the questions that we saw in the YouTube chat. And just before we take the break again, I think to citizens, just be a little bit more compassionate. Chat people business less as well.
Yes.
If it comes to you in a particular way, common decency and respect for human dignity would dictate that you don't share it.
Right.
Sometimes we're a little bit too mixed up in Jamaica. I don't know how much better to put it. Right?
Yeah,
you perhaps can
that.
massage it a little bit better than I can. But we take the break and we will pick up.
Yeah.
Get ready for Nationwide 90 FM at Denby. Follow Nationwide 90 FM to the Denby Agricultural Industrial Food Show on August 1 from 1 to 5 p.m. We're bringing you the vibes, the voices, and the vibrant culture from Jamaica's biggest agri-celebration. Then, follow back away again to Denby on August 2 from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. From farm to fork, youth in agriculture, and the best local produce, you'll hear it all. Keep your station locked to Nationwide 90 FM. We're bringing the Denby Agricultural Industrial Food Show to your airwaves on August 1 from 1 to 5 p.m. Then on August 2 from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m.
This broadcast is brought to you by the National Land Agency, the Jamaica Urban Transit Company, the Jamaica Bauxite Mining Limited, the Jamaica 4-H Club, and the Jamaica Customs Agency.
Looking for your perfect place to call home? Let Nationwide 90 FM be your guide with Let's Talk Real Estate, the key to unlocking the property world. Tune in every Wednesday at 4:05 p.m. during the E-Zone for 15 minutes of must-hear insights. Whether you're buying your first home, investing in commercial spaces, exploring industrial opportunities, or eyeing a plot of land, we've got you covered. Brick by brick, lot by lot. From dreamers to developers, we break down the real estate maze. It's Let's Talk Real Estate every Wednesday at 4:05 p.m. during the E-Zone, only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media. Let's Talk Real Estate is brought to you by Law Boss Attorneys at Law and Red Roof Properties Limited, opening doors to smart property investment.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. So we didn't do the week that was, but Jade and I will have a brief discussion on some matters. I will leave the climate justice one to you. I'm not sure if you saw that coming out. I will share it with you in email. But we heard from Commissioner of Indicom. He was speaking at a meeting recently by the Kiwanis Club of Spanish Town, and he spoke passionately about some matters that JFJ had also called for and expressed some concerns about some months ago. And let me start. The reports that we have gotten at JFJ about the mask wearing and the balaclava wearing, balaclava-clad officers in planned operations, we reiterate our call for the police commissioner to speak to what policies exist and guide when it is appropriate for officers to be wearing masks. We had expressed our concern here at JFJ, both in the planned operation as well as routine operation, for example, traffic stops and so on, where we observed ourselves, officers, clad in balaclavas and masks. I personally observed and have spoken to officers on the road that I cannot see your badge numbers or anything that would identify a unique officer, any unique identifier.
Yes.
I would have to look to the service vehicle to see a number. Our citizens may not. We expressed our concern because there was a complaint that came to JFJ some years ago where an individual said that he was beaten by soldiers within the zones of special operation.
Yes.
And he was not able to identify a single person because they were wearing balaclavas. I think, again, the police commissioner should speak to it. And so, too, should the JDF. Because, yes, we understand for certain operations, officers may need to protect their identity. But certainly, we should be able to discern who we're interacting with. And again, when it is appropriate for the mask to be worn. But I'm happy that you partner spoke to it, saying that they have also been getting those complaints. And it is certainly a hindrance when an investigation is to occur. Because in that same case that I made mention of, Indicom recommended no charges be laid because they weren't able to identify the officers who were allegedly involved in that abuse. So the complainant, he had medical reports.
Right. There was evidence of the abuse.
But he couldn't identify who.
Couldn't identify.
Can you imagine?
Right.
We must speak to those things. The other thing that Commissioner Faulkner spoke to, which we want to say, which was the basis upon which JFJ did our protest earlier this year. And as we stated, raising these concerns should not be seen as anti-police or an attack, but there are valid concerns to be raised. And Indicom went a step further in saying certain things. Firstly, Indicom's commissioner mentioned that they have gotten complaints about officers obstructing the process of an investigation or potential evidence by destroying CCTV footage. Inappropriate and a complete breach of trust that we have in the force. We have gotten complaints of people's phones being grabbed out of their hands, people being threatened to delete footage that they have recorded via their cell phones. And these are allegations that the JCF must treat seriously. When we met with the police high command, we asked for the police high command to issue a public statement, as was done in the past, to advise the public that there is an absence of law that permits or hinders recording. And the absence of law means it can be done. So as long as you're not obstructing the police from carrying out their lawful duties, you are free to record. And no police officer is to be asking citizens for their phone to delete anything. Or if the threats
or forcing them to unlock
are
the
true,
phone,
then the police command must dealing with. Yes, forcing them to unlock phone and that sort of a thing. But we need the police high command to say, these are the standards that our officers must adhere to. The other thing, the body-worn cameras. JFJ spoke to it and we will reiterate our position. Body-worn cameras should be mandatory. We go a step further. As you have in other jurisdictions, there should be a law governing the body-worn camera. There should be no option to turn off unless you have a very good reason to. We know that you have the standard operating procedures guiding the wearing of body-worn cameras, but should it be made in law? We believe so. The police fatal shooting numbers are far too high And yes, they are alarming. As at July 23, Jamaica recorded 186 police fatal shooting. I want us to put in context that at the end of the year, the calendar year 2024, we recorded 189. But July 23, we recorded 186. JFJ had warned that if the trend continues, we will reach 300, possibly more. And clearly we're there. It's alarming. And by the way, we are not naive to think or even suggest that these are babies that the police they're come in contact with. But we have said all the time that the laws for self-defense is very clear. So if the police must defend themselves and other citizens, bystanders, they must. But the absence of body-worn cameras call for greater scrutiny. And I think that's a call we can all join in on. The Prime Minister, Dr. Andrew Holness, had said, those who are calling for cameras are going to get camera till we don't know what to do with cameras. So the Prime Minister, where are they? And when you do procure them, how many of them would be allotted or allocated towards the planned operation? Where last we did our checks based on Indicom's report, over 40% of police fatal shootings came from those planned operations, up from the 26% the previous year. I think those are reasonable calls that we are making. And I invite the Jamaican population, the citizenry, to join us in these calls. They are quite reasonable. We reiterate our own, and we support the recent calls made by Indicom's Commissioner, Hugh Faulkner. And we're happy that Indicom came out with a strong press release, which I made reference to last week.
Yes.
And most recently, when Hugh Faulkner was speaking at the Kiwanis meeting.
Yes. I think I heard Mr. Levy speaking on the same issue.
That's Horace Levy?
Yes. On the issue of the body-worn cameras and the need for a certain level of alacrity, which is something we've discussed before at JFJ, but it's been many, many years, even just looking at since our first discussion on procurement and infrastructure. And to think that we're still discussing procurement and infrastructure after all of this time.
And no clear commitment, Jade, is a concern. Because,
and no timeline. It's
because if the argument is that these are some areas wherein the police need a certain type of body cam because of the hours that they're going in and they need to move stealthily and so on, how can we not get a clear commitment that of the body-worn cameras to be procured? Some of them must be the ones that have night vision and
to
so on.
To support those planned operations.
I can't get it.
Yes.
There must be some clear commitment. And again, I don't think these calls are unreasonable because no matter what, these are lives being lost and we have a justice system for a reason. So, I don't know. But let me show you what I was talking about, Jade. Boy, I'm blind as a bat. Forgive me. This was the outcome I was making reference to with the.
Yes.
You saw it. Jogging memory now.
Right. Yes.
You really need to take those pills, to improve the memory. Too young.
Right. It was that of the small island developing states and the issue as to the decision from the International Court of Justice on climate change and how it has affected those small island developing states, what those legal obligations would be for not only those states but for those other states whose actions has led to this effect.
So I think we need to have a discussion on that, I tell you.
Yes, I have to agree.
So it is so hot till my skin itching me.
Yes, it's really bad. But we knew it would be bad because one of the things that we saw before was that Jamaica was going to be one of the first cities, Kingston was going to be one of the first cities to reach climate departure. which essentially means that, your climate will start to drastically change. So I'm not shocked that we're here. No. It is disappointing though, because we're a small island, so a lot of what we're feeling is not really
based on what the others, the bigger
based on what we did, right?
Doing, yeah. So anyway, that's the day man looking at us. We're up on time. Who won trivia? Do not say that person's name.
So the trivia winner was news commentator. The answer for the trivia question was the Data Protection Act. So the question was, which piece of legislation protects your sensitive personal data? And sensitive personal data is a technical term, right? And the act that protects it is your Data Protection Act. So anything to do with your fingerprints, your DNA, your blood work, your personal life, your family life, all of those things are sensitive personal data and protected under the Data Protection Act by data controllers.
And Kimmy, you came in second, but unfortunately, news commentator won.
Yes, BT.
All right, thank you so much. That was Let's Start Justice with JFJ, Michael Jackson, Executive Director,
and Jade Williams, Policy Research and Advocacy Manager.
Have a great week.
Justice, the people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under law. Justice, Jamaica the known. Right to life, right to liberty. Out of many we are one in a Jamaica. Make it a better place for the boys and girls. Created equal by the creator. For equal rights and opportunities. No to unlawful detention and police brutalization. Class, gender, race or religion. We not tolerate discrimination.
To join the fight against injustice, contact us at 755-4524 or JamaicансForJustice.org.
The people's champion.
The NHT is lending up to 12 million for homes priced at 14 million or less, making home ownership more accessible for Jamaicans. We are building Jamaica.
The time by the Office of the Prime Minister is
2:01.
Truth is, HIV affects everyone. Truth is, avoiding care leads to a weaker immune system.